mean, there's lots of stories about our oldies, hunting around here and, watching the fish come in. We had our mullet netting guys down there fishing and things like that. So this is an important spot for us right here because it's a fish lookout. So, we'd have groups sitting up here of our elders watching the various different seasons. And we've got our big seagull out there, which we call Moradar. He's out there now, looking for fish and things like that. I just saw him fly past. Yeah, so that's who we call Moradar, big seagull. So my name's Robert Cooley. I'm the Senior Ranger for the Gamma Rangers. So I'm in charge of the day-to-day operations of the program and everything that goes with that, and also the planning for the future. Well, as you can see by some of the vegetation around here, would have been lush vegetation, would have been an ideal place, to reside. We have sheltered beaches here, which a lot of that seagrass goes right to the shore. So easy hunting and gathering for skilled fishermen and stuff like that. So there's plenty of sheltered caves. There's abundant mammals on land. So, they can hunt. Topping that off with fruit and stuff, natural native fruit that grows off the trees locally here. Matching that with fish. So you'd have to say it'd be an ideal place to live, really.
So the seagrass is really important. It's actually threatened at the moment. And it's a really big play in our community. It's habitat to a lot of types of fish and crabs, so blue swimmer crabs, mullet, whiting, flathead. It's a really big play with it all, because if that isn't here, then that's not going to bring in the lobsters and the sea urchins and whatnot.
My name is Maddie Langley and I'm a research assistant at the Sydney Institute of Marine Science. I grew up on the coast of New South Wales, and as part of that upbringing I got to spend a lot of time down at the beach playing amongst the seaweed, and I did a little bit of snorkeling when I was younger as well. So it was always very obvious to me how important seaweeds were. And seaweeds also were always quite beautiful to me too. I love the way those underwater forests looked when I got to go swimming in them. Crayweed is what we call a habitat-forming organism. So when it grows, it creates a complex forest that creates habitat and shelter for lots of other marine creatures, just like the forests on land would. So when we lose these habitat-forming organisms, we completely lose that whole ecosystem along with it. So when you find a healthy crayweed forest, it's this beautiful kind of golden green, quite tall seaweed that flows back and forth with the waves, and you'll always see lots of little fish darting in amongst it as well. If you actually look a little closer at the seaweed, you'll find lots of invertebrates like urchins and lobsters that like to make their homes in the crayweed forests too. But in areas where the crayweed has gone missing, we do still have some other seaweed species that grow there, but there can also be a lot of barren patches of reef as well. And when you find a barren patch of reef that has no seaweed species at all, it really does look like an underwater desert.
My name is Cruz. I've been working in marine science for the past 15 years. And kind of it all started when I was a little kid, growing up near the beach at Maroubra, often visiting before and after school, playing around the seashore, spending countless hours and days looking at little critters and general exploring. Yeah, the marine ecosystem in Sydney is actually quite good compared to other places in the world. For a large metropolitan area, it is quite healthy. But we shouldn't accept it for what it is. Before kind of the 70s and 80s, it was even better. So during the 70s and 80s, we had a lot of sewage right near the coast, and it was poorly treated sewage, and a lot of the seaweed species suffered, in particular crayweed, which is a species that we're trying to return to where it once existed.
The Sydney Institute of Marine Science in Chowder Bay has the best office views in Sydney. Here is where Dr. Peter Steinberg does research on our marine environments.
So in about 10, 15 years ago, a group of us working on kelp in Sydney realized that this major species of kelp, Crayweed or Phyllospora camosa, had disappeared sometime in the 70s and 80s. We knew that it was here earlier, and in the 90s and 2000s when we started looking, we realized that it had disappeared from along the coast of metropolitan Sydney. It occurred north and south of Sydney, but 70 kilometers of an underwater forest had disappeared.
Do you know the reason why it disappeared?
You know, it's hard to go back in history, but we think we do. So prior to the 1990s, sewage, primary treated sewage along the coast of Sydney was deposited directly along the coast. And so if you swam in the waters at beaches like Bondi in the 80s, like I did, there was a lot of sewage in the water. And in fact, the beaches along the coast of Sydney were closed something like every third day in summer.
In the 80s and 90s, Sydney had developed into an international city. The cost to our marine environment was steep. Human activities had changed these shorelines forever.
So in the 1990s, the deep water ocean outfalls were built, and there are 3 outfalls which are 3 kilometers off the coast in about 80 meters of water. And it takes that sewage and distributes it further out offshore in deeper water, and there are these diffusers that diffuse the sewage. So it radically changed the water quality along Sydney's beaches and the coasts. So then to connect that to crayweed, so we know that crayweed is very sensitive to pollution. People have done work, particularly on the younger stages of crayweed. So again, hard to go back historically, but we think what happened was that as Sydney's population grew and more sewage entered the water, we think that that damaged the crayweed populations and caused their local extinction along the coast of Sydney.
What has been done to help rehabilitate these kelp forests?
Around 2010, 2011, we began a restoration program to try and bring crayweed back to the coast of Sydney. So the initial hypothesis was that the water quality had improved sufficiently that crayweed could live. So the first question was, if we move crayweed back into Sydney, will it persist? And so we did that at a small scale, and it did, it survived. And importantly, it began to reproduce. So we realized that, in fact, the issue now was no longer water quality, but it was the inability of crayweed north and south of Sydney to repopulate the coastline of Sydney.
It's daybreak at the University of New South Wales. It is where Maddie and Derek are getting ready for a mission. So what's that for?
So when you wear those thick neoprene wetsuits, it makes you really buoyant. So you need to literally wear lead weights around your waist so that you can get down to the sea floor and actually get your hands in amongst the crayweed.
They are on a restoration mission, codename Operation Crayweed. First, we are headed to Botany Bay boat ramp. Botany is the heart of Sydney's commercial shipping operation, but it is also where the effort to rehabilitate our coastal environments must begin. Conditions are not the best this morning, but the work must go on.
Yeah, just really clear communication with the skipper. Yeah. Shannon.
Yeah, if you need Shannon to slow down for whatever reason.
We are heading south to Cronulla. This is where Maddie and Derek must retrieve healthy samples of crayweed for replanting. From the protected waters of Botany Bay, we head out into open waters.
Cronulla now, and this is the southern extent of metropolitan Sydney, and this is where Crayweed starts to reappear. And this will be our collection site for today. Collect some plants and bring them back on board, and then head to Kurnell for our planting later today.
Yeah, we use these super highly specialised laundry bags, which do the job very well.
Sea laundry.
Yeah.
So we'll be using knives just to remove the plants from the reef today. The idea is to collect the plants entirely so that they're all intact and healthy for replanting.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
Are you guys going to bring bags back to the boat?
Yeah. I don't think we'll collect that many today. I think we'll collect like 40 at the most.
Yeah, I think 40 tops. Nice one. Yeah.
There we go.
Recently, strong winds and rain has made the water quite murky, lowering the visibility.
We visit reefs where the crayweed is healthily growing, and we use knives or other implements to just detach a whole individual from that reef. And when we do so, we make sure we include the holdfast, which is kind of like the root structure of the seaweed. It's what attaches it to the reef. So we collect that whole structure of the seaweed and we transport them to the new location. We try and keep them a little bit moist and cool while they're on the move so they don't get too stressed out. And then we use cable ties to attach them onto mats that we've fixed to the rocky reef at the new location.
They must collect at least 30 or 40 individual plants. The more they have, the better chance they will reproduce when they are replanted.
So we take these cable ties with a bit of a rubber casing around them, and we just tie them around the stipe of the seaweed. So the stipe is kind of like the trunk of the seaweed. And then when we get to the site, we'll use some other ties around this rubber band onto the mats, and that'll be what holds the crayweed down.
So when we're removing the plants, we're quite careful to remove the entire plant, including the base, the holdfast, because that's the attachment point, so we want it to be...
There you go, that's something. Yeah. Don't know what that is.
It's a little polychaete, yeah. Put these under a microscope, you'd discover another world of animals. So just to show you kind of biodiversity that one plant supports.
You have the floor ready. So crayweeds are quite a unique seaweed in that they have male and female individuals, and you can actually tell which one's male and which one's a female by holding up their little blades, and you can see the shape of the vesicles inside the blade, and they're the little pockets that carry the reproductive material. These ones, I can see the vesicles are quite elongated and irregular shaped, and so I know that that's a male crayweed there. And so all of the blades on this individual will hold male reproductive material. Let's see if we can find a female in here somewhere.
Yeah, so all the little hydroids in here, it's just to show
all the other little critters that this seaweed supports.
When we say they support biodiversity, it's not just the fish that live amongst it or maybe feed on it. It's all of these little other kind of secondary colonization, and then there might be other animals like fish that don't actually eat the crayweed, they eat the things growing on the crayweed.
Soon we are off again. We head to Canal on the tip of Botany Bay. This is where Operation Crayweed is planting a new forest. Today's work is only half done, but along the way, in what is a rare treat, the team pauses for an encounter with one of the sea's more playful mammals, the dolphin.
I don't think I've ever seen dolphin before.
For scientists like Maddie and Derek, this encounter reminds them why they love their job. Time to get back to work. At Cornell, we are diving in to do the planting.
I think this is okay here. Yeah, but the drop off is right here.
Alright, I'm in your
Bye.
Good? Weed or just crayweed?
This is a new rehabilitation site at Cornell. This newly planted crayweed forest is yet to reproduce, so Maddie and Derek are keeping an eye out for babies, which they call craybees.
The plants actually are only there for a short period of time. What we hope is that the adult plants are actually reproducing in their new home, and it's the little baby crayweed that will then kind of form the next generation.
To plant the crayweed, they must use cable ties to secure it to a mat that is attached to the sea floor. Simple tasks become far more difficult underwater.
That process is pretty stressful for the crayweed, even though we try and make it as little stress as we can, which actually causes them to release their reproductive propagules as soon as we replant them in the water. It's like a kind of a stress trigger, and they, as a last-ditch effort, decide that they want to reproduce as much as possible.
If you look at one crayweed specimen, you'll find hundreds of little critters that call that home.
So it's a forest, and so that question is about what role do forests play in ecosystems. And they play dramatic roles, right? They're fundamental to those systems. If you chop down a eucalyptus forest, you have a very different ecosystem than you had while that eucalyptus forest was there. So it's very similar for kelp forests like Crayweed or other kelp forests. So it provides structure to the habitat, it provides food to the rest of the organisms, it provides oxygen to the water, so it's fundamental to the structure of those habitats. Diving in a kelp forest is actually one of the most awe-inspiring and spiritual things that I've ever done. That's a message we'd like to convey. Not only is it just as fantastic as coral reefs, but it's just as important a habitat.